On the 16th of October, 2016, Randy Travis, a man who could no longer reliably say his own wife's name, stood up and sang in a room full of the most decorated people in country music. He got through it. Not perfectly. Not the way he would have in 1987, when that voice was the most valuable instrument in Nashville. But he stood at the microphone at the Country Music Hall of Fame medallion ceremony, and he sang "Amazing Grace," and the room came apart. 3 years earlier, doctors had told his wife he would almost certainly not survive the night. Randy Travis is 67 years old. He has severe aphasia. In most interviews, his wife Mary does the talking, because the pathway between what Randy Travis thinks and what Randy Travis can say was destroyed in the summer of 2013 and has never fully come back. But he sang. And the reason he could sing, when he could barely speak, is the most misunderstood part of this entire story. This is what actually happened. Before any of it, there was a rejection. Not one rejection, everyone available. By the early 1980s, Randy Trawick, the name he was born with, in Marshville, North Carolina, had been turned down by every major label in Nashville. Not passed over quietly. Turned down, repeatedly, by an industry that had already decided what country music was supposed to sound like in 1983, and it was not this. Understand what Nashville wanted then. The urban cowboy boom had reshaped the format. Country radio in the early 80s was smooth, string-laden, pop-adjacent, engineered to cross over. Executives were not looking for a hard country baritone from Marshville who sounded like he'd wandered in from 1962, like he'd been listening to nothing but Lefty Frizzell and Merle Haggard in a room with no windows. They had a business model, and he was not in it. He was cooking at the Nashville Palace. Elizabeth Hatcher, Lib, his manager, and, for a time, his wife, kept pushing him at people who kept saying no. She got there in the end. On the 14th of February 1985, Randy Travis signed with Warner Brothers Nashville. The first single, On the Other Hand, went out in July of that year and essentially disappeared. It reached the 60s on the chart and stopped. By the ordinary logic of the record business, that should have been the end of it. Warner tried once more, with a song called 1982. It went top 5. And then the label did something unusual. They re-released the failed single. In 1986, On the Other Hand, came back out, and it went to number 1. Storms of Life arrived on the 2nd of June, 1986. Produced by Kyle Laning and Keith Stegall, and built deliberately against the softness of the era, it did not just sell, it moved the format. Within 2 years, everything Nashville signed was measured against it. The neo-traditionalist wave that carried Ricky Skaggs and George Strait forward, and that opened the door for Alan Jackson and Clint Black and eventually Garth Brooks, has its clearest single origin point in that record. The industry had rejected him for sounding like the past. He then dragged the entire genre back toward it. By the time he was done, he had sold in excess of 25 million records. 16 number ones, among them Forever and Ever, Amen, which became his signature, the song that radio could not stop and audiences could not forget. 7 Grammy Awards. Grand Ole Opry member from 1986. Whatever measure you use for a durable country career, he holds it. Now go back to that failed single, because it explains everything that comes next. Listen to what Randy Travis does in the opening lines of On the Other Hand. The band is playing a straightforward mid-tempo shuffle. He is not on top of it. He enters fractionally late, every phrase, and he stays there, a bass baritone sitting behind the beat, never once pushing to catch up. That lag is the whole trick. It reads, emotionally, as reluctance. A man admitting something he would rather not admit. Regret has to arrive late, or it isn't regret. Then listen to where the song peaks, the turn in the chorus, the moment the melody offers him an obvious place to open up and go higher. He doesn't take it. He holds the line down and lets the words do the work. He had the range. He mostly declined to use it. That was the discipline underneath everything. It is why a man who was 26 when he recorded that vocal sounds like a man of 50. It is why the sad songs land. Producers described that voice the way people describe weather. Years later, Chris Lacey of Warner Music Nashville would struggle to define it at all. The thing that hits you in the chest and makes you feel known. That phrasing, The way he leaned on a syllable, the way he let a note decay, was something he had absorbed from Lefty Frizzell and bent into something entirely his own. Understand that the voice was not a gift he was handed. It was a machine he built, deliberately, out of restraint and timing and control. In the summer of 2013, that machine was interrupted, and not in the way anyone would have predicted. What failed first was not the voice at all. It was the heart. He was working out at home when he had trouble breathing. What sent him to hospital in Texas that July was viral cardiomyopathy. The mechanism is grimly simple. A virus, in his case following a respiratory infection, reaches the heart muscle. The chambers enlarge, the muscle weakens, the heart stops pumping blood efficiently, and then it stops pumping enough at all. It is not a lifestyle illness. It is not something you earn. It happens to fit people in their 50s who happen to catch the wrong virus. His condition deteriorated into congestive heart failure. Doctors implanted an Impella left ventricular assist device, threaded in by catheter rather than open surgery, to take over the work his heart could no longer do. Then his heart stopped completely. He was placed on life support and put into an induced coma, a measure intended, among other things, to protect the brain. 48 hours later, when he came out of it, the doctors found what the crisis had caused. A clot had formed in the failing heart, traveled to the brain, and caused a stroke. Not a small one. It struck the entire central region of the left hemisphere. He needed emergency surgery to relieve the swelling. There is a number that gets quoted about his chances that night, and it varies depending on who is telling it. Mary Davis, who had known Travis for years and would marry him in 2015, 2 years into his recovery, has said less than 1%. His producer recalled being told 2. What matters is that the people in that hospital did not expect him to live, and they told his wife so. He lived. He was in hospital into November. There were further surgeries and infections. When he finally came home, he had to relearn how to walk. He had to relearn how to read. He had to relearn how to spell. And when he tried to speak, the words would not come. This is the part almost every telling of this story gets wrong, and it is worth slowing down for. What is aphasia? Aphasia is not confusion. It is not memory loss. It is not a decline in intelligence, and it is not, in any sense, a loss of the person. In most people, the machinery that turns thought into language sits in the left hemisphere, the region that took the worst of the damage. What that damage does is sever, or badly degrade, the root between an intact thought and the spoken word that expresses it. The thought is there. The word exists. The road between them has been washed out. Randy Travis understands what is said to him. He recognizes people. He knows his catalog. Mary has spent 13 years telling interviewers essentially one thing. Randy understands everything. He simply cannot communicate it the way he used to. In his memoir, he described the experience directly. The frustration of being trapped inside his own body, understanding the world around him perfectly, and unable to say so. Sit with that. The man built an entire career on the most articulate instrument in the format, and the thing taken from him was not comprehension, not memory, not musicianship. It was transmission. Which brings us back to that room in Nashville in 2016. Because singing does not run entirely on the same wiring as speech. Language production is heavily left lateralized. Melody, rhythm, prosody, the musical scaffolding of a phrase draw on distributed networks including the right hemisphere. For some people with non-fluent aphasia, a word that cannot be spoken can still be sung because it arrives on a different road. This is not a folk belief. It is the operating principle behind melodic intonation therapy, a recognized clinical approach to aphasia rehabilitation, and specialists in the field pointed directly to Travis when explaining it publicly. So when Randy Travis stood at the medallion ceremony in October 2016 and sang Amazing Grace, and again in Texas the following spring in front of a crowd that rose to its feet, it was not a miracle, and it was not a stunt. It was the clearest possible demonstration of what the stroke had and had not destroyed. The music was never the thing that was damaged. Only the speaking was. Which leaves a question almost nobody in the history of the format has had to answer. What do you do with a career that outlives the ability to perform it? The answer he arrived at is stranger, and better, than most people realize. In 2019, Randy and Mary approached a singer named James Dupré, a Louisiana baritone with a deep familiarity with the catalog, with a proposal. Travis would be on stage. Dupré would sing. The show would go on with the songs intact and the voice borrowed. The band came back too. Steve Hinson, David Johnson, Lance Derry, Bill Cook, Joe Van Dyke, Herb Schucher, the original touring band, the men who call him Hoss, back on the road together for the first time since just before the stroke. They called it the More Life Tour. Travis appears throughout, with Mary, engaging with the crowd and the band. He does not sing. That is stated plainly on every ticket page. And people come anyway. Over 50 shows in 2025 alone. More than 60,000 people. Sold-out rooms. The tour extended into 2026, with a leg that opened in Muskegon, Michigan in March. Then there is the record. In 2023, Chris Lacey at Warner Music Nashville was watching the same thing everyone else was. Cheap AI imitations of famous voices proliferating online, including his. Her question was whether the technology could be turned the other way. And the first thing she thought of was giving Randy Travis his voice back. Kyle Laning, who had produced Storms of Life 37 years earlier, thought it sounded like a parlor trick. With Travis's blessing, he tried anyway. They pulled 42 isolated vocal tracks from the vault to train the model. Laning chose a song called Where That Came From, written by Scotty Emmerich and John Scott Sherrill, which he had held onto for years, a ballad he believed could carry the specific humanity of Travis's phrasing. The guide vocal was sung by James Dupré. Laning fed it in. The analysis took about 5 minutes. He was the first person to hear it. By his own estimate, the raw output was already 70 to 75% of the finished record. He and engineer Casey Wood, who had worked with Travis for decades and knew what the man actually sounded like, spent the rest of the time fixing what wasn't authentic to a Randy Travis performance. Where That Came From was released on the 3rd of May, 2024. It debuted at number 45 on Billboard's Country Airplay chart, his first solo single to chart in nearly 20 years. Travis was in the room while it was built, at the console, listening. A second AI-assisted single followed before the year was out, confirming that Warner Music Nashville regarded this not as a one-time event, but as an ongoing part of his creative life. The label was explicit that it was not a novelty. Lacey's position was that there was no reason he shouldn't be able to make music, and that denying him that would be indefensible. Reasonable people disagree about what that record is. Whether a voice reconstructed from 42 archived performances, sung first by another man, is really the artist singing. Whether this is restoration or something closer to taxidermy. That argument is not going away, and it will follow every artist who loses a voice from here on. But it is worth noting who was not confused about it. The man himself sat in that studio and approved it. In March 2025, he appeared at the Grand Ole Opry, almost 39 years after joining it, ahead of the 100th anniversary celebration. He did not sing. He stood there, and the room stood up. That is where Randy Travis is at 67. He cannot say most of what he means. He needs his wife to finish his sentences, and she has done it, in public, for 13 years, without ever once framing it as a burden. He walks with difficulty. He will not make another record the way he made the first one. And every night the tour plays, several thousand people buy a ticket to watch a man stand on a stage and not sing. If this is the first time you've understood what aphasia actually is, that he is still in there and has been the whole time, tell somebody. That is the part of this story that keeps getting lost. Because the industry rejected that voice for sounding like the past, and then it defined the future of the format. A virus took it. And 13 years of work and technology and a wife who refused to accept the prognosis gave a version of it back. Nashville has produced better singers. It has not produced many more stubborn ones.